Okay. Wham! It's been a week. I think it's been a week. And we're back at it again with some more critique. Should be fun. So, the first person to ask for critique is Loon, who has provided this wolf character. Okay. Loon's question is, I'm looking for critique on this design specifically. This is my D&D character, and she recently got a new breastplate and cloak, so I have to update it. I was going for an asymmetrical design because the original design was very symmetrical. I think the breastplate is too dark, but I'm honestly not sure how to fix that. Originally there was a lot more gold in her design, so maybe turning the armor gold would help. But it's my view that whenever we have a problem like this, and you come up with a potential solution, the best, most sort of remedial course of action is to just put that solution to the test. So if you're saying, well, maybe the armor should be gold, or just the breastplate, or whichever part you think, just test that, and it doesn't have to be a particularly advanced test. It doesn't have to be perfectly polished and perfectly painted. Maybe we just start by adjusting the color, etc. Once I lasso this out. That's a bit cloak. Okay, so I've got the armor selected, and I'm just gonna put on like a... Maybe we use a gradient map actually. The gradient currently is pure white, which isn't gonna work. So let's take oranges. That'll be a good start. And then I think we want to make sure we've got our brightest sprites. Something pretty dark. Slide this around, put some more colour in there. Okay. We can also just take this and make a new layer of the mask and see about brightening things up. Let's assume that she's below a sky, so we're going to get reflected blues and things. Okay, so that's one potential solution to your problem, is changing the color of the armor. I think it looks very different. Maybe it takes the character from someone who's initially quite dark to someone that's a bit too fancy. We could say that. But now that we have this mask, we can do all sorts of things. So we could take this mask, and we don't necessarily need to make it gold. We could just make a levels adjustment layer, and we could just make it lighter, like it's a much brighter silver. Like, that's pretty cool. Because you're right, the problem with this, if we just make it black and white for a second, is that all of these values crunch together. It's like, other than the head and the paws, the whole body is just this mass of dark. But if we can bright part of that up, we get this kind of 70% dark, 30% light. And that's a nice ratio. So that's not too bad. Maybe we can play around with this a bit more. I think we've got the time. Not many people have asked for feedback today, so we're not in a rush. Like, one thing I'd be keen to do is get some of these reflections back on. Make sure this thing reads as being metallic. So I'm just getting that sort of light dark banding around the place. One thing that's a little bit weird to me, but I'm not a D&D guy, I don't know about wolves, wolf-based characters. It's just the fact that the hair is actually a different colour to the fur. Is that intentional? You know, if we could group more of this hair up as being the same variety of colours, you know, that's now a bigger overall shape. You know, by contrast, we could just take more of the colour from this and put it onto places like the ears, so that the hair doesn't feel so separate from the rest of the head. That's a pretty small thing. You've got to watch out for placing items and things where they're not going to get any attention because they're crushed under the silhouette of something else. So, like this satchel, is this important to the design? Maybe, maybe not. Potentially it's just a satchel. But if it is important, maybe we want to shift it, you know, put it over here on this waist so that we can actually see it. You know, it's coming out from the rest of the silhouette of the character. At the moment, this cloak is just completely hiding that. That information may as well not be there. You could add some kind of latch or something on the satchel to brighten it up a little bit, or just make the material something else. Let's have a think. Other things I would watch out for is this. I've spoken about it before on stream. Is this idea that individual things stand out, and I find that this is a real problem with people designing D&D characters, because D&D characters always have these little things that they've picked up along the way that kind of fight for our attention. It might not be the case here. So the example I always use to show it off is if we've got 3 little people that are different colours. None of them really stand out compared with the other ones, you know. But if we have 3 green guys, the 3 red guys, well, all of a sudden the blue guy stands out because he's the only one. Well, there's fewer. There's 1. So the same thing's happening on your design. There's 1 important satchel, unless you count these 2 as being the same gem. There's like 1 pretty unique gem there. There's 1 pretty unique sigil there. Then there's 1 circlet, 1 cape. Like even this thing, it's like a padded gambeson kind of material, because it's just poking out of one side. I know you're going for something that's a lot more asymmetrical, but you've got to be careful that you're not making things like this that they don't appear anywhere else. There's none of this gambeson material is anywhere else on the whole character, and so it stands out as being pretty unique. Now, maybe we just keep the asymmetry to the cloak, right? So let's say we bring in this gambeson on the other side. Let's grab the correct colours if we can. Okay. So now I think the asymmetry of the cloak is even more powerful and stands out because everything else is more symmetrical, right? You know, alternatively, you could make the cloak symmetrical and then this thing would stand out, but I'm not so sure you want that. Like, could this and this have the same sigil? Maybe. Maybe we keep this part of the gambeson there, but we imply that actually the material up here is not like brown leather, but it's the same gambesini material. Because if this is a bit of clothing that sits underneath everything, there's no reason why that can't be the case. I would also be tempted to move it closer to the center where it might part, make a sort of bigger feature out of it. Plop. Let's have a think. But again, I think the more important overarching idea here is that you are stuck with the design, or maybe not stuck, but you want feedback on it. You're looking for some kind of advice or change you can action. The best thing you can do is just try this stuff out. It's taken me what, 10 minutes maybe, and we've done all sorts. We've changed the color of the metal. We changed the color, like what if it's like a bronzy gold. Then we played around with like changing the hair, rendering the metal a little bit, playing around with this gambesson material. It doesn't take a particularly long amount of time, and it's this kind of critique that I'd like to see people applying to their own work. Just in a doodly way, like this gambus is so badly drawn. These little doodly scribbles that I'm making, you know, but it's fine. It gets the point across. We can play around with that as a bigger concept or idea. Other little things that I feel throw me off when I'm looking at this design is level of detail. So I find it strange that you can have such a high fidelity, really cool chest plate with all these engravings and grooves, and it's like multi-layered, and it's got a glowing crystally thing in. I have no idea what that is. Maybe is it only glowing because of our thing? No, it was glowing before. But then like the pants barely have any seam lines on. Like they're not even cuffed at the bottom. And even if they were cuffed, you know, maybe that's still not fancy enough. Should they, like, how do you actually put them on? Should they have some kind of button thing going on? Super armored up here, but like, are we really not going to have any like pauldrons or anything else? So it's there's a huge disparity between the top of the character and the bottom of the character. I tell you what, one way we can think about it is, hello fish flops, thank you. Okay, this, if I just gave this bottom half of the character to someone and I said, what kind of a character is this? I don't think they would get what you're trying to give off, compared with the top half that is like heavy armor paladin, if that makes sense. So it's about unifying the design overall, and whether or not you want that to be, I don't know, knee pads. Or what else could we do? I really like this gambesini material, but I don't know where else I could put it. I'm a VTuber, yes, making shorts. I'm doing so well. But yeah, hopefully you get the point without me expanding on it too more. I'm brain dead today, apparently. So just play around with those things, but just play around with it on your own. Like, you don't need feedback necessarily. I'll always give you feedback. I don't mind. But I think it's a really important skill is to like play around with this stuff. A lot of the time I'll have a design and I will just take half an hour to, like I'm doing now, just draw on top of it. You're just making notes, but visually. You know, how could we change this cloak? Maybe it doesn't need changing, but let's just see what we can do. So now there's no cloak. Okay. Well, what if the cloak goes behind that way? Like, comes up on the other side, but underneath this thing. Well, it's not super asymmetrical anymore. What if the cloak goes further down this arm? Like it's a much bigger, grander sort of thing. And then, you're right, it's sort of all tattery. Like that's something you can do, but that's changed the silhouette a lot more than this cloak has. We've really split it down the middle and we've said that this half's gone. You know, you could go further with it. You could go... Yeah, actually, the cloak's going to do that. But we're losing that magic circlet thing that you've got. Whatever it is. And, again... How long has it taken me to try this? It's a really scrappy little doodle, but like a scrappy doodle is fine. It's taken me maybe 2 minutes to try a couple of different ways that we could have this cloak. So play around, enjoy, thumbnail, doodle, try this stuff out. Fish flops, you're saying, how does one build commitment to a piece? You're back in the old sketching phase. It's one of those things you just have to have a little bit of self-discipline and force yourself to commit to something. You would hope that if you've chosen to commit to painting something that you enjoy that subject matter, and you know that might make it easier or whatever. But you'd have to see if that's the case. Right, let's reply to that. Next is Art of Sane. Let's group all of this. Art of Sane has produced this and says, hey Morrow, it would be great if you could give me some feedback on this one. The problem I see is this doesn't look like a design. It just feels like a random image. So do you have any tips on how to incorporate design? I think you're starting from your description of the problem I would disagree with. Everything is a design. It just depends on how out there you want the design to be. Like, this is designed. It doesn't just look like a random image. It looks like you have designed this. But whether or not the design is saying the thing you want it to say is completely different. If you think it looks like a random image, then maybe the design is too vague and not specific enough. Like, it's not going in any particular direction. So it seems like you're going in like a punk rock kind of direction. She's got tattoos, she's got big earring, septum piercing, that kind of thing. What else can we use to reflect that? I'm just going to get rid of the background because I think it's distracting and it's not going to help us figure out what we're doing with this design, is it? So give me a second. While I remove the background, let's think about what we can do. What other sort of, not stereotypes, but yeah, stereotypes. What other things can we play into with that kind of punk look? Well, we could go for something pretty obvious to begin with, and then maybe something less obvious. So, one thing that might be fairly obvious is, like, dyed hair, right? But it might be that the hair was dyed a funny colour a while ago. Maybe it was blue. Maybe it was a lighter blue. And so it's sort of growing out, like it's all down here. Could be any colour you want. Right. But immediately, well, that's a bit more punk, and a bit more interesting, and a bit more unique. She's not abstracted enough. I have no idea what you mean by that. Next thing, well, she's wearing a t-shirt. The t-shirt has nothing on. You know, should there be like a band logo or something? Right, just that extra little bit of information. I'm imagining that this is one of those like death metal logos, or maybe it's just like a spooky skeleton. The hair itself, like, one thing we can do is if she's a very abrasive character, it looks like it. She looks like she's mean, but in like a fun, quirky kind of way. Is, you know, maybe we can get some sharp shapes in that says actually this character is not all nice and round and friendly. You know, it could be the same up here as actually we bring the hair out and down. I should start using a different brush. But that sort of spike at the end, right, well, this is a little bit more aggressive. What else can we do? Ooh. All sorts. Without getting too far away from your original character, just take things that you've already done and exaggerate them more. So, she's got 2 earrings. Why not give her 3 earrings? 4 earrings. I feel like this gold hoop one doesn't quite match the rest of the aesthetic, but I'll leave that for now. Little things that you might not at first consider, like if she's a bit of a tomboy, she's going around getting in scuffles, skateboarding and then falling off the skateboard or whatever. You know, could it be that she's got scuffed elbows? I'd have to practice drawing scuffed elbows. Not entirely sure what they look like. Right, but it's just fleshing out the story of the character a little bit more is what I'm saying. Okay, so you have the idea, it's there. Okay, I'm gonna design a punk character. Well, just with, you don't even have to draw this stuff. Just ask yourself a series of questions. Okay, what's the personality like? What clothes would a punk wear? If you were a punk, what would you wear? That kind of a thing. Like, you know, are her fingernails going to be painted black? That's such a small thing, but it builds the world around this character, if that makes sense. It could just be that the character looks like this. And they do look boring, and normal, and, like, that's fine. It's just whether or not that's what you want. So, again, I think just the answer is if your design feels generic, well then you need to give yourself a more appropriate or more specific thing to design, right? You know, give yourself the right brief, and then ask yourself the right questions, and then you will arrive at the right solutions. Yes, I would agree that the shapes need to be more designed, which is I'm beginning to do with this sort of apathetic attempt at making the hair more spiky, but that's my advice. So I'll grab this and I'll put it in the feedback channel. Someone has added me. It's Loon. Okay, next is Requiem. So let's hide all this away. Oh, Requiem has said, trying to paint blood texture with some blood bending hand. Spoilered for the Queasy because it looks kind of gory. It does look kind of gory. I think you're on the right track. I just think that the blood needs to be reflecting more of its environment. And so it's very shiny and dark. It tends to be very dark, which you've got quite well. I just think you need to punch in some brights. You know, wherever you already have some of these reds, you have these globby highlights where this stuff is really, really reflecting those speculars. if you take you could try and show this off with like an individual sphere maybe. It's also got a lot of subsurface blood, so like the inside of it is going to warm up. Something like this. And then you could swirl it around. But it's got to have that bright highlight, I think. It's probably also going to have some kind of Fresnel on it. I think maybe one of the other things that you've done, not wrong, but I wouldn't have done it the way that you've done it, is you've got very hard mark making, very hard brushstrokes. And I don't think that is completely ideal for what you're trying to show off. I know it's like a very violent, rough bit of blood that's coming out of this thing, but we have to think about everything in a series of contrasts, and the contrast with blood would be that it's smoother, not rougher, if that makes sense. So we can have a contrast of color, which is like cooler versus warmer. Well, the blood's going to be warmer, so maybe we can exaggerate that fact, make it even warmer, even redder. Then we've got a contrast in edges. Well, blood is going to have softer edges than something like a hand. It globs. It's very viscous and thick. And so, you know, I think the blobbiness of it is helpful. We've got contrast in value. Blood is much darker than the hand. You've already got that. But then we've got contrast in drawing. And one of this might be that the actual drawing of it should be softer or rounder. There should be a lot more sort of gradient at play, and then you get those like lighter colors with you know, that makes it feel like a super reflective liquid, but it's because I'm using nothing other than soft brushes on top of each other. I think even you've got like chalky brushes which make it feel a bit more like dried blood, which is cool. You know, you can get that contrast in between the dry and the wet, but I think the wet is important. Yeah, to the point where we could put another stream through here and say, look, there's another bit of one thing you can actually do, which is really fun, I don't know if you use Photoshop, but this is for anyone who does use Photoshop, is that if we already have this orb that I just painted really quick, you can just sample the orb. So I could sample orb, and then I can kind of paint with the orb. Let's use a different brush. Is it this one? Oh, no, it's not that one. I don't even know if I have it anymore. I used to have a really nice brush for this kind of thing. Well, that's okay. So I can sample the orb, and then I'm just painting with those colors, and I almost get the highlight built in, as long as I go back over the top of that and reinforce some of these bigger changes. That's funky. Maybe on the hand itself we could think about how the hand is affected by blood. So it's not obvious to me where the blood is coming. Well, I guess here. This is the point at which all the blood is leaving the hand. But it could also be coming out the palm of the hand. It could be coming out the fingers or something. And so, you know, what if we said actually, you know, as all the blood is leaving the hand, it's getting quite pale. And it gets more pale the further away from that contact point it is, and maybe it gets warmer the closer to that point it is. And then you're right, the tips of the fingers can get warm again, but warm in a subsurfacey way, like they're glowing. Does that make sense? So some kind of gradient or something, you know, you could get individual veins under the skin that's saying that all of the blood is traveling to a particular point. I feel like you're just getting a bit too chaotic with your brushwork, and it's confusing the image a little bit. So bring it back a little bit. Fishflops, you've always wanted to ask this question and you were thinking about your thoughts on it. Do you think painting and hatching can ever be mixed? Yeah. Yeah. I paint and hatch all the time. Let me just put this blood feedback in Discord, and then I'll have a little talk about it. Oh, I could not import to clipboard. Okay. Yeah, painting and hatching. Yes, that is you're describing how I paint, which I'm glad someone wants to know about that. Let me just bring up a couple of my paintings. Like, I've got one I did this morning. I've got, interestingly, I don't do it traditionally. I don't know what you would draw on top of oil paint to hatch. Let me bring up some drawings of mine as well. We can compare them. So here we are. This was a painting I did this morning, and I am hatching. That is, I love it. So you can see there's hatching up here, there's hatching down here, there's hatching here. You can even see there's very subtle hatching in here. A lot of other elements are hatched, and it's exactly how you would expect. Is I literally get a brush that's this big, and I hatch. And I think it's a really great way of showing like forms that are turning to or away from light. Sometimes you just want to use hatching to glaze over different colors. So it might be that on this side of the skull, the shadow side, I want to get some cooler colors in. I will select a cool, like a blue, and then I might literally just hatch directly over the top of a lot of this stuff, you know. Zoom out. It's not too bad. Like, it's implying that there's some cool in there, which is kind of fun, you know. That's interesting. So that's one example of hatching. More hatching, like if I've got smaller textures, again, I'm making my brush smaller and I'm kind of describing them with my pencil. Let's close that one. This is me drawing a mummy at the museum. So this is a mummified Egyptian corpse from a couple thousand years ago, and this is traditional. And you can see that this kind of hatching is how I draw traditionally. It's how I've always drawn traditionally. And almost immediately, there's some more traditional stuff. Like, that comes into my painting. That is how I'm describing these forms when I'm painting, is I'm grabbing a lighter color. And this skull and this are like the same. You can see I'm sort of bringing some of that down into the other part. but it's digital and it's in color, so it's more like paint. No, you don't have to paint with blending tools. You can paint and hatch. Like this whole painting, it's JPEG compressed because it was very dark. You know, like I think the whole thing is hatched. Whenever I'm picking a light, I'm just putting it in and I'm hatching. I've got this that I describe more as like scumbling up here. But you can do that. You can do it really, really well. You're a part of the Patreon, Fishflops, and on the Patreon is the real-time version of this painting that you can watch because you've already paid me, which is great news for you, bad news for everyone else. And this whole painting is tons and tons of hatching laid on top of itself over and over and over again until you get all sorts of interesting like hatch marks on top of texture, on top of paint, on top of other stuff. This is actually where I put down a brushstroke. Let's do it again just to show you what I mean. So it might be that I want some green on the face, so I'll put down a brushstroke. And then I'm actually hatching in the opposite direction. I'm hatching into it. Like you can take away or add. You know, I could hatch in the other direction as well. Yeah, and when we zoom out, well, actually that green on the cheek doesn't look half bad. You know, it sort of blends in quite nicely. You didn't know I had a Patreon? I'm always plugging my Patreon. There you go, I've got a Patreon. Sign up, pay me money. These critique sessions are actually, well, they were intended as advertising for my Patreon, and then I just decided to carry on doing them. But if you join the Patreon, you can just get critique whenever you like. You can pop work in the Discord, and I will give you a paint over. I will sit in VC with you and explain things to you. I'm more than happy to do that. You don't have to wait for a Monday session. But there you go, hatching. Isn't it magic? Love it. Love hatching. Do it traditionally. There's some more traditional drawings, and that's how I draw. And so, yeah. Do it digitally, by all means. I think it's really cool. I want to get more people hatching digitally. Eduardo, you've said, let's just grab this. You said you're trying to draw this character from the back by flipping the drawing and painting over it, but you're struggling. Also, if you gave any feedback on the design, you'd be appreciated. Okay. So, the main things that you need to watch out for is the perspective of what's going on. Namely, feet, where things are planted on the ground. So you flip the design over, you turned it over, but these shoes are still facing that way and that way, when they should be going that way and that way. So this is causing, I think, the most confusion at the moment. You've done a reasonably decent job of making these ellipses go round and making this hand feel like it's facing away. Personally, I would just grab it and bring it a bit closer to the rest of the body. So let's just draw a little diagram to make this clear. So what we've got is we've got a cylinder, okay, and then we've got another cylinder. Now this cylinder here is closer to us, and so it's bigger, and this cylinder is overlapping the other cylinder. In fact, we can give me my cylinder overlap. So we can do that. Okay. If you flip that, it's not going to be the same shape, but with this, because we've also got like more of the body in the way and whatever else, you might find that there's more overlap the other way. So let's flip it, and you might say, well, actually now we're seeing much more of this cylinder, you know, and the other arm is hidden behind it. It depends if you're flipping it like absolutely perfectly, but I'm not a fan of this method, because you end up trying to fix your own mistakes so much that you may as well have just drawn it in perspective. I think if you can't draw it in perspective and you're struggling to take this character, break it down into 3D shapes, and then draw it from another angle, then that's what you need to practice. And so it would be worth you trying to do that anyway, rather than just flipping it and painting over it. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So the idea is, it's such an important skill, like the drawing of it. If you don't understand the 3D form of your character enough to draw it from a different angle, then that is the thing that you need to work on. And so any practice you can put into that, any time you can put into doing that, is more useful than this. I understand if you have some kind of deadline you're going to meet, that maybe you would want to take this kind of a shortcut. Patreon links is in the description. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, these feet. So again, just understanding this as a 3D form. It's a plane, and it's coming towards us, and the heel is the back of the plane. Okay, well then over here it's got to be a plane that's going away from us, and the heel is the back of the plane. So the heel should be the thing closest to us on the ground. So let's just get rid of the shoe. Right, and again, embracing the fact that some of these elements might overlap. You know, maybe this foot comes this way. That's fine. But immediately the perspective of this is important. Okay? Get that perspective going. What are the perspective-y things? I see the updated version in chat, but what I'm about to say you haven't updated is just the front of the design is very intricate, which is fine, but the back of the design is not intricate at all. You know, actually, should this go up that far? Should there be some kind of connecting thing for these shoulder plates? Like, how are these connected? Maybe they're connected at the back and not at the front. Something else? You got these funky patterns. You know, is he gonna have like a big pattern on his back? I don't know. But it's the perspective. It's just a big perspective riddle to solve, and it's very fun if you can solve it. Okay, so there you go. Get that perspective fixed. Next is this, which is dramatic. It's very cool. You haven't said anything about what you want feedback on. You're in VC. Let me know what exactly you want feedback on. Is this a keyframe for something? Is it more of an illustration? Are you trying to show off a character design? Do you want feedback on the anatomy, on the drapery, on the lighting, on the mood, the composition? Like, there's a whole host of things that we could talk about. So just put in VC or in the feedback channel maybe something a little bit more specific. You are the last person to ask for feedback today, so we can spend some time on this if you have the time to hang around. Oh, we just gained a Patreon member. Excellent work. Excellent news. It's more of an illustration. You wanted to try out a more expressive style without making it look sloppy. Okay. I think we need to work on the expressiveness has to fit within a category, I would say. Okay, so if we have a box and we make it very rigid and we say that is the box, well, that's boring. Okay. If we make the box out of something very expressive and random, well, it's no longer a box. Like we're losing something about this original box. There was some kind of defined form here that is lost. Now, whether or not you're willing to lose it, it depends what it is. You know, maybe you want to lose it a bit more on something like fabric, but less on a person's face. I think you can combine both. So we could make a selection of a box, and then into that you could be as expressive and chaotic as you want. And then maybe you say, well, the edges are still too hard, too solid. Well, then we can play around with those edges, but we're going to do it carefully and, you know, a bit at a time without sacrificing everything all at once. So, working expressively within a group is what we're talking about. And so a group that you might want to define is like individual value groups. So one thing I'm looking at here is it's not 100% obvious to me when I look at this. What's the dress and then what's the tablecloth? Now, maybe that's a deliberate thing that you want to do, is you want to make it look like she's lost in the tablecloth and it's a similar material, and that's the composition you want to play around with. There's a Soroya painting that comes to mind that I will grab really quickly, which is this. It's called The Mother by Soroya, and it's a woman in a white dress in a white bed in a white room with a baby in a white swaddle. And you can see that because Soroya's gone, he's sort of fully committed to the bit, if you want to describe it that way. Like, this is all the same. We could flatten this even more if we really wanted to, and it would be fine. All of this information is compressed, and so all we get standing out from that is the head, the little hand poking out, and the little baby. Okay. You did want to make it look like she was... Yeah, I think just go for it. Like, conceptually, that's a really cool idea. But there's so much noise and contrast here that's just eliminate a load of it immediately. Okay. The tablecloth and hairdress are now the same. And maybe she stands out from that because she's like shadowed on top of it. So we could make these shadows deeper and then leave the rest of this stuff fairly plain. You know, maybe this completely gets lost. I will say that this shape up here, you got to be careful with the shapes you're making because they need to relate to something. And so it might be that she's resting, the dress is going to poof out, but like, where is it going to poof out? Well, down here. You know, just this break here that I've made is sort of allowing the form going down into the ribcage to show just a little bit, right? So she's not completely hidden. Maybe in comparison to the rest of the cloth, we want to make her skin a bit more like the red that's going on behind. I don't know. That could be fun. But I would wipe this away. I also wouldn't... I'd be tempted not to shade in complete black. Not because that's some kind of sacred rule. but because of the material quality of the thing that you are painting. So depending on the kind of cloth that this is, it's probably a little bit translucent. You know, if you hang your washing on the line outside and it's very sunny, a lot of that light scatters through, and that's going to fill these shadows with some kind of other colour. You know, might be that this turns as it goes down here, but the shadows aren't going to be all that dark. Let's suppose that this is a light group. And maybe it does come down here, but it falls into a different group. And then again, into this, now that we've defined it as one big group, you know, maybe we can be expressive. Play around with this stuff. What if we just lose that edge? Like, that's okay, as long as the important thing that we have is defined. So it might seem counterintuitive, but what I'm telling you is that if you want chaos, you can't just have chaos. The chaos has to be bound within some kind of order, and the more order you have, the more chaos you can have. Okay. So the more of these shapes that bind the chaos together, the more free you are to play around inside of them. People will still recognize the shapes and ignore the fact that you've like made a complete mess elsewhere, an artistic mess. So play around with that. You know, how much chaos can you get? How much refinement can you get? I don't know. You would want to bring back a lot of these shadow shapes, but just be a bit more careful with them. In your original, the cloth is like... Oh, I've scribbled over your original. In your original, the cloth is very... it's bumpy, and it's folding everywhere at every point. And I don't think cloth behaves like that. You'll find there are a lot more areas of cloth that are relaxed and aren't doing what you think they're doing. And so you want to play with that as well. Just think of art like a language. If you've read Alice in Wonderland, there's the poem of the Wabberjack, which is nonsense words. It's a nonsense poem. And so it's very chaotic, but that nonsense is inside of a grammatically correct sentence structure with grammatically correct punctuation and everything else. So we can kind of understand the poem and we know what they're talking about, even though every single word that's used just doesn't exist and isn't real. Whereas if you had a poem where the grammar was wrong, the punctuation is nonsense, and all the words, then it would have no meaning whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. So put all that chaos within something. You know, are there more of these dinner plates and candles that are doing that? You know, maybe the candle's been knocked over and the tablecloth's about to catch fire. I don't know. It's all sorts of fun. I'll put this in VC without the fire, maybe. As fun as it is, you gotta control yourself a little bit. Oh, people have been writing in VC. Ew, my lord. Ew, British. I am British. Yeah, correct. Right. It seems like that's it for today. No one else has put anything in feedback, so I will bid you farewell. I hope this has been useful. Do subscribe to the Patreon, and pay me lots of money. I think that'd be kind of cool. And if you don't want to do that, just enjoy the free content. Join the free Patreon. Put some work in there, get some feedback on it. We do this every Monday at 6 p.m. British time. And we'll be doing it for every Monday for the foreseeable future.